Chapter 6. We both know you won't do that. Anger. Pure, unfiltered rage filtered through my bloodstream, poisoning the air I breathed. Jack knew how to press my buttons. I was a grown-ass woman and I did not deserve to be spoken to like that. Oh, even thinking about it fueled my rage. My feet began to hurt a little from stomping in my heels, but the pain grounded me. If I continued to think about Jack, then who knows what I'd do. A sick, twisted part of me hoped that Jack would try something so I could arrest him. Was that bad? I shook my head, trying to forcibly clear my thoughts. The action reminded me of when I was a kid, trying to use my Etch-a-Sketch to draw pictures on car journeys. I inhaled deeply and exhaled loudly, pinching my nose. I pulled out my phone, connected my earphones, and blasted AC/DC. Music was the one thing I could rely on. It wouldn't leave me or piss me off. It slowed down my pace from I'm about 30 seconds away from murder to I just want to watch you burn while I sit and watch, and joined the back of the queue. I did a quick head count to myself as a note to tell Miller when he arrived. To be perfectly honest, I felt pretty underdressed. I'd say a good 95% of the women were in dresses, all of varying body styles and lengths. Maybe 15 were wearing a skirt-blouse ensemble, and less than 10 were in trousers. There were a few that caught my eye, and all I can say is, holy shit. One lady with pitch-black hair was wearing an ornate lace navy dress, finishing just above her ankles, showing off perfectly manicured toes with wide open-toed heels to match. Another was in a tightly fitting red dress that hugged every perfect curve of her perfect body, with ruby red lips to match. And here I was, in a simple black dress and wedges. I felt severely underdressed. I didn't take my earphones out until I walked into the theatre, where a heavily muscled man was checking tickets just before the auditorium. I walked past, having not bought a ticket yet. I managed to get in touch with an old friend of mine who had acquired 2 tickets for me on short notice. I slowed my walk, admiring the intricacy of the architecture. Swirls were woven into the stone, each design no bigger than my thumbnail. The ceiling was so intricately painted it must have taken months to complete. If only I was that talented. The friend I was going to get the tickets from was more than a little bit shady, I must admit. She had good intentions, but her methods of achieving them weren't always great. Like now, she was giving me some tickets. I chose not to ask how she acquired them, but insisted on me meeting her in the stockroom to get them. As I approached the door to the stockroom, another heavily muscled man blocked my path. I looked up, meeting blue eyes.
Ma'am, you can't go through here. Employees and performers only,
the bodyguard said, putting a hand in front of my chest. I pulled out my FBI badge and smiled sweetly. Agent Clarke, sir. I do believe I have clearance to pass through. The bodyguard picked up my badge and looked at it carefully, obviously trying to find any source of fakeness. My heart pounded a little. The last time I had a run-in with a bodyguard, I got mugged.
My apologies, ma'am.
I tutted and waved my hand as I put my badge back in my bag. Never apologise for doing your job, sir. Have a good night and enjoy the spring break celebrations. I passed through the doors, immediately spotting my green-haired friend. She held her arms open with a grin.
Asti! It's been ages!
I twitched my nose. I thought, as I did, how much I must have looked like a rabbit. I still hate my name, Sab, I said, hugging her.
Ugh, tell me something I don't know.
She hated her name as much as well. Sabrina Maria. I know. I laughed every time her mum shouted at her, Sabrina Maria!
What can I do for you, my lovely FBI friend?
Sab asked, sticking her arms in her pockets. I hath come for my totally legally obtained tickets, my fair lady, I teased, curtsying.
Ah, well.
Sab played along.
In that case, your highness.
She presented 2 tickets.
As promised.
I snorted and pushed her shoulder, getting a 20 out of my purse. Thanks, dude. This has got me out the shit tonight. I owe you one, I promised. Sab waved her hand dismissively.
Just pay me back by making me a niece or nephew.
I laughed out loud. Sabrina, with all due respect, you couldn't pay me enough money in the world to have a baby with your brother, I giggled. And anyway, isn't he gay? I asked. Sabrina shrugged.
Details.
I hit her arm playfully. We joked around for a bit, enjoying each other's company for the first time in a few years. But, as all good things do, it ended when the physical incarnate of sunshine rang me 3 times in a row. I rolled my eyes as I sent him to voicemail for the 3rd time, glancing up at Sab.
Go. I know that face.
I pouted. There is no face. This is my face. Sab raised her eyebrow.
First of all, you know I know you better than that.
She smiled slyly.
Second, bitch, don't quote Mulan at me. As if I wouldn't recognise that phrase.
I rolled my eyes. First of all, I copied, I will always quote Mulan. It is elite. Sabrina nodded.
Valid?
I nodded in return. Second, it was work calling, so I need to get moving. Sab sighed.
Your work sucks.
She grumbled. I laughed. Work isn't the problem, it's who I'm paired with, I sighed heavily. But it is what it is. Sabrina hummed.
All right, well, take care of yourself, yeah? I don't know what you do, but I know it can turn very quickly. So, be careful.
I pulled her in for a quick but tight hug and left the stockroom. I walked towards the auditorium, humming to myself. I wondered what the Cobra gang were going to do. It had something to do with Tiffany's, otherwise I wouldn't have seen Levi here. Sab's ticket said Hamilton, and yet there was no Levi. I frowned at the thought. At that moment, I heard Sab shout my name. She ran up to me. Miss me already? I asked, adjusting my shoulder strap.
You nearly left this behind.
She laughed, panting slightly. In her hands was my purse. I must have left it on the shelf. I grabbed it and thanked her profusely, knowing a photo of Emily and I was in there. I've never told Sab about Emily. I feel a bit bad about that, but I try to tell as few people as possible. Just before I opened the door to the main foyer, Sabrina spoke up again.
Just so you know, I'm sorry.
I frowned. What do you mean? She gently tugged a piece of purple hair.
I know what purple means.
I looked away feeling ashamed. I shouldn't be feeling like it, but I did. By the time I looked up again, Sabrina was gone, and I was alone again. After my odd interaction with Sabrina, I made my way to mine and Miller's seats. They weren't anything special, unlike what a small part of me was expecting. Our seats were just your average run-of-the-mill chairs. Mine squeaked a bit, so I swapped it to Miller's. He can be the one to piss people off. My social anxiety ramped up at even the thought of having to speak to people I don't know. Oh, save your judgment. I know. If someone has social anxiety, why work for the FBI? The truth is, I don't know either. I guess when I'm in the lead, I don't feel anxious anymore. Like, they aren't going to know if I screwed up. They're just going to think it's part of the act, thus not having to explain myself if I mess up. I don't think in a normal way, people. Don't judge me. Anyway, while I was waiting for Miller, I began thinking about my short but emotional interaction with Sabrina. I don't know how she knew about the purple ribbon, but I'm not sure I wanted to find out. Sure, the purple ribbon stands for other things than physical abuse. For example, it also stands for pancreatic cancer, epilepsy, and Alzheimer's. Sabrina didn't strike me as the type of girl to have Alzheimer's, with, her slightly illegal activities. I pray to God she doesn't have cancer, or that she's got epilepsy. Miller arrived 5 minutes later, looking as annoyed as usual. He grumbled as he sat in his chair. It creaked loudly. I raised an eyebrow and turned to him. What's crawled up your ass and died in the last half an hour? I teased. Miller didn't take the bait.
Goddamn security guard. They wanted my ticket, but you had it. I had to try and explain. Then they wanted my badge and... God.
I frowned. I hate to break it to you, Mills, but it's kind of their job to ask for tickets, I pointed out. Miller glared at me, but it had no real heat behind it. I hope he doesn't feel different now he knows about Mason. The lights dimmed after 5 minutes of weird silence between Miller and me. He kept looking around the theatre, almost as if he was searching for someone. I looked over my shoulder to see if I could see anyone from the FBI spying, but I couldn't. I frowned and turned back to the stage, waiting to hear anything to do with the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to tonight's special performance of Hamilton. The show will begin in a few moments.
Not to my surprise, the theatre wasn't as packed as it probably usually was. The lack of pre-show chatter got my mind gears whirring. Why hold a theatre performance in Hamilton in the middle of spring break? Who were they expecting to turn up? It certainly wouldn't be the teens or young adults. Most of them were either drunk, high, in jail, or all of the above. It was an odd time of year to hold a theatre performance. I debated speaking to Miller about it, but he had already had something planned. I caught Miller looking around the theatre again, and I sighed angrily. What are you looking for? Your constant moving in that goddamn chair is driving me up the wall. Miller frowned at me for a moment, then settled into his trademark glare.
Why does it bother you?
He snarked back. Because, Ancient Miller, you seem to forget that I, too, am on this case with you. Including me in your little secret plans would do you well, I replied, curling my lips slightly. Miller's eyes widened slightly, but otherwise he did nothing. I rolled my eyes and turned back to the stage, which was blanketed in darkness, save for one square thing on the stage floor. A single man, of probably no more than 30, ambled on stage.
Ladies and gents,
I watched as he nervously wrung his hands.
we are extremely sorry, but we are currently experiencing a slight wardrobe malfunction and are unfortunately running 30 minutes behind.
The room groaned loudly.
We would like to offer each of you a drink and small popcorn on the house by way of an apology.
He continued, unbothered by the disappointment.
Some staff will come by momentarily, and once again, Olympia Theatre apologises for the disruption.
The theatre lit up again as all the lights were flicked back on. Oh, the person in charge of outfits was going to get in trouble. I put my hand to my face and bit my middle fingernail, zoning out. I hated being in a crowded room, like, with a passion. I always felt as though people were judging me, watching me. I didn't ever want to get up during a movie at the cinema either, not unless I was at the back or right near the stairs. I was guilty of looking at people when they got up to use the loo, but they didn't care. I did. I tried to divert my thoughts by forcing myself to think of something else. Like, why did Levi say he was watching Hamilton, yet not appear to watch Hamilton? Yes, I know for the ruse, but how did he plan on moving forward if, like now, I also decided to watch Hamilton?
What are you frowning at?
Miller asked, waving his hand in front of my face. I shook my head slightly. Nothing, don't worry, I replied, falling into one of those zone-outs where your eyes stare at one spot for ages. Miller hummed unconvincingly, but didn't say otherwise. I've got a gut feeling, I said, mainly to myself.
What was that?
Miller heard me. I dunno, something doesn't feel right, I replied.
Well, you wanted to watch the damn show.
I turned in my chair. As opposed to sitting on my ass all night drinking beer from my friend's fridge, I bit back. Miller grumbled but dropped the subject. After a while I felt like I was going to explode from the seams. I've got to get out of here, I mumbled.
What's your issue now?
I slapped his arm. You and your constant negative attitude. That's my issue. Miller stared at me with wide eyes, rubbing his arm.
You hit me.
I rolled my eyes. Grow up. I can hit harder next time, I snapped, standing up. My seat bounced back with a quiet thud. A few people glanced over, but that was it. I'm going for some air. Ring or text me when the show's going to start. I pushed open the double doors into the cool 18 degrees Celsius, I will never understand Fahrenheit temperatures, March breeze. The air stank of vomit and alcohol, but it was better than the stuffy auditorium. A few shops were still open, but it was mainly bars and nightclubs. It was a little surprising to hear club music near a nice theatre, but hey, that's Miami for you, I guess. Across the way, ironically, were a few jewellery shops. Place to finish off the evening after a couple had been to a restaurant then a theatre performance. Well played, corporate America. Well played. I decided I'd take a walk across, curious to look at some of the jewellery, which I was way too poor to afford. I crossed the road, ignoring the drunk teens stumbling into a nightclub, and opened the door. I realised rather abruptly that they were not teenagers heading into the club. They were early adults. I didn't go properly clubbing for the first time until I was 20, not because I couldn't, but because I simply didn't want to. I mean, I'd go with Mason, but I never really enjoyed myself. Florida, Miami specifically, did have clubs for those under 21, but you couldn't drink. What was the point? But anyway, sucks to live in America, I guess. Though I'd love to live in New York or Los Angeles, or maybe even abandon America and head to Canada. My phone buzzed harshly in my pocket suddenly. I glanced at my watch, 7:51 p.m, then looked back at the store with a frown. Tiffany's closes at 7, generally speaking, so they should have locked everything up by 7:30 at the latest. I checked my watch again to make sure it was right. It was. Another point to add was that even though there was an active auction tonight, Tiffany, Pandora, otherwise, it wouldn't be held at the store. It will be held at an auditorium. Any decent store wouldn't have an auction in their shop. I made sure my small handgun was still in my purse and pushed through the doors. None of the main lights were on in the store, and the blinds were drawn. There was somebody in here. I walked slowly so as to not alarm anyone I was there. No robber worth their salt would come alone. There was a 1000% chance there was going to be at least 2, if not more. And with America allowing guns, I'd rather not take my chances. Some voices began whispering around the wall. I ducked down behind a display case, getting ready to get my gun out.
Jack, you make sure nobody's by the door. Clarisse, you do lights. Blake, you get ready by the back. I'll make sure we've got everything.
By pure process of elimination, that had to be Levi. I peeked out through the glass display case to see who was remaining. Blake and Levi had left, leaving Clarisse and Jack. The former pressed a few buttons, and the blinding store lights flashed on. I shielded my eyes immediately as Clarisse swore under her breath, obviously annoyed that the sun had decided to take up residence in the overheads. She continued to press the switches, finally hitting the correct one. The burn from hell stopped assaulting my eyes, giving me enough reprieve to open them. I rubbed the dots away, refocusing on Clarisse, who had already begun to move off.
I'm gonna go help Levi. You good, Jacko?
I'm always good, Reese.
Clarisse snorted. Oh God, not Jack pining over Clarisse. I paused for a moment, giving Clarisse a quick once-over. Fair enough, Jack. I daren't breathe. One small move and I'm busted. I needed to get out without Jack seeing me. It looked like he hadn't locked the door yet, so as long as he left the room for a few seconds, I could get out. I crept along the back side of the wall, hiding behind some display cases. Jack turned the opposite way to where I was, and I dashed to the final display case before the exit. I needed to find something light enough for me to pick up and throw, but heavy enough to direct his attention. A small but heavy-ish looking emerald ring glinted in the low lights as if God was finally giving me something good. I reached over and picked it up. I waited for Jack to turn around once more, then tossed it across the room, ducking down again. The ring clattered on the doorframe and bounced to the floor. Jack walked over, as predicted, and bent to get it. I leapt up and dashed to the door. I yanked it open, not caring if it slammed behind me. I was out, and that was what mattered. I rang Miller as soon as I reached the theatre lobby. "Miller, you've got to come see me in the lobby. Now," I hissed.
What? Why? What's happened? Are you okay?
He rushed back, fumbling around in the background. "I'm fine, but you need to get down here like 10 minutes ago." I disconnected the call and paced anxiously. I watched through the partially drawn drapes, making sure they didn't leave. I didn't like how prepared they were. I didn't like it at all. Well, that, and the fact that they had guns, was a negative as well. The lights were still on, but this time, Jack and Blake were at the door, staring at the theatre. They knew I was in the theatre, or at least Levi did. They must have worked out I was in the store, but why hadn't they come over yet? Something about the way Blake was staring put me on edge. When I interrogated him, he had this look. Not hungry per se, but I suppose it's a mix between hungry and analytical. Either way, I didn't like it. Not one bit. Not giving me much time to dwell on it, Miller made his grand debut, rather dramatically, by flinging open the theatre doors. I saw the Cobras, over there, robbing Tiffany's. He peered out, pulling the curtain back a little.
How do you know for definite that it's them? We can't arrest if we aren't at least 99% sure.
Miller let the drape fall back. I can give you complete honesty and say I'm 1,000,000% sure it was them, I replied, playing with the ring on my finger.
How are you so certain?
I was just in there, that's how I'm so sure, I bit back. Why didn't Miller believe me?
Oh, damn. Okay, hang on. Let me think.
Miller paced the foyer, muttering to himself. Why don't you just call for backup? I asked, sitting down on one of the fancy seats.
Because we'll draw too much attention. We want them to stay there until we're ready to take them down.
I rubbed my eyes, sighing. They're gonna move on soon. I think they know I was there. They aren't gonna stay there much longer, I warned. Miller didn't say anything. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and flicked through my apps, trying to find the family tracker that Mum insisted on us all having. Maybe Jack was stupid enough to leave his location on. A sudden ping revealed a singular message from Sabrina. I tried not to panic immediately. Sab didn't text, not really. Not unless it was urgent. Sabby boo. Call me ASAP. That didn't sound good.
Hello?
I sagged in relief. Hey, Sab, is everything okay? I got your message. Sabrina sighed on the other end.
Oh, thank God you rang.
I frowned. Is everything okay? Are you okay? Something shuffled on the other end like she was moving about.
Me? I'm fine. Now, I don't know what FBI crap you're doing, but I've just seen a thing on Lily's Instagram saying how they're taking the party to the streets at 8. So every street you can think of will be filled with drunk students.
Oh shit. Thanks for the heads up. I began to pace.
Be safe, okay? You tend to put yourself on the back burner for others.
I rolled my eyes. Talk soon, Mum.
Who was that?
Miller sat next to me. I sighed. My friend. She said that everyone is going to have a street party, basically. That's when the gang will move, I bet you. I said, closing my phone and putting it away.
Damn, we gotta be quick then.
Miller replied, standing. But we still got... I paused and checked my watch. 4 minutes left until 8. Miller smirked and pointed through the drapes.
They don't think that. Look.
I stood up and peeled back one of the drapes and watched out of the window. The Cobras stood at the door, waiting for more students to come out. On a guesstimate, I reckon there were at least 30, maybe more. Miller suddenly clapped his hands. The sound made me flinch. Jesus Christ, man, you just made me jump, I hissed, slapping his arm.
You work in the FBI, and you jumped at a hand clap.
Shut up. It means I've got good reflexes, I snapped. Miller rolled his eyes.
Right.
Well then, while I'm still alive from ducking when I hear a bullet sound and you've been shot, don't whine to me, 'cause I won't listen, I bit back, turning away. Miller laughed.
Whatever, Clarke.
No less than 4 minutes later, the Cobra gang left Tiffany's. Miller cleared his throat and clicked his gun.
Ready?
He asked. I breathed in deeply and exhaled slowly. Yeah, let's get the slippery bastards. Miller pushed open the door, looking every bit like a movie character. Don't tell him I said that.
FBI, stop right where you are.
Well, there goes the sneak in and blend in with the students plan I had. The Cobras froze like they'd been paused. Miller ran at them, his gun raised. Then they split and bolted. I chased Clarisse through the student-filled streets. The dress's large size worked in my favour, giving me more leg room to chase after her. In any case, I knew I should have worn my suit. Suddenly she ducked, practically morphing into the busy spring break crowd. Shit, I cursed. I saw Levi next and pursued him. He glanced back with wide eyes and ran in between people. Excuse me, FBI, move please, out of the way, I yelled, squeezing in between everyone. Most people shifted when I shouted FBI, but there were a few drunk people who just stumbled. I followed Levi through an alley and watched as he jumped onto a wheelie bin and pushed up onto the wall. I pulled out my gun. Freeze! I yelled. Levi stopped moving and slowly turned around with his arms raised. I breathed heavily as I pointed at his legs. You should never shoot with the intent to kill, only to disarm or incapacitate.
You gonna shoot me?
I chuckled.
What's so funny about holding me at gunpoint, may I ask?
I shook my head. It's rather comical that a big bad crime guy has been cornered by a woman in heels, I smirked. Not great for your rep, huh? Now, If a sudden noise hadn't startled me, I would have noticed Levi itch back on the wall. "You move and I shoot," I warned. He smirked lightly and wiggled his fingers in a goodbye gesture. I pulled the trigger. Levi fell with a thud on the other side of the wall. I jumped up onto the bin and threw my leg over the wall, much like you do when you mount a horse.
You fucking shot me!
I rolled my eyes and jumped down the wall, landing gracefully on my feet. "Oh, calm down, Levi. It was a blank. I wouldn't waste a bullet on you," I snapped. He glared at me with wide eyes. He tried to get up, but cried and fell back down. I could see him grabbing his ankle. I sighed and bent down to look at it. He flinched away. "Calm your tits, I'm not here to hurt you," I snapped. I grabbed the damaged appendage gently in my fingers. I turned it about and gently poked at the already swollen area. "Looks sprained or broken, I can't tell," I finally said. I rummaged around in my small bag and found my scarf. "Can I wrap this around it? It won't do much, but it'll keep it in place long enough for you to get help," I asked. Levi didn't say anything. I wrapped it up. We stayed in silence for a while, maybe 10 minutes or so before a twig or something snapped. I stood up in front of Levi. Criminal or not, it was my job to protect people. I cocked my gun. I pointed it at the entryway of another alley. "Who's there? Come out with your hands up and I won't shoot," I yelled. I could hear some scuffling and slight groans as Levi pushed himself up off the floor against the wall.
"We both know you won't do that,"